Greetings to my brother here, Carlos Lopez, Executive Secretary of UNHCR. I'm flanked with all brothers, Excellency United Nations Special Representative of Secretary General, Mr. Ismail Sheikh Ahmad, Excellencies, Ministers and representatives of the governments of Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia and Mali, a special representative of the Secretary General, Mr. David Nabarro, our brother there, Mukhtar, Vice President of the World Bank, and representatives of the different UN agencies, UNFPA, World Health Organization, Humanitarian Affairs, UN Women, UNICEF, UNDP, UNAIDS, Excellencies, representatives of partners from different countries, Canada, China, Cuba, EU, France, Japan, Kazakhstan, Norway, United Kingdom, United States, and any other state that I may not have mentioned. Our Commissioner for Social Affairs, Director General, and representatives from the AU ASEWA team, and all protocol observed. A warm welcome to our headquarters, and thank you very much for accepting the invitation to participate in this short meeting on Ebola. We are meeting today as stakeholders to review where we are in regards to the epidemic and what steps to take immediately and what steps to take in the medium term. Whilst there are encouraging signs that we are beginning to turn the corner, we still have significant work to do, ensuring that all countries are Ebola-free in the shortest possible time. And Ebola has had a devastating effect on the socio-economic life and well-being of mainly Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. So this means the greater task, once we are Ebola-free, would be to focus on the reconstruction of the general health system and bringing normalcy to the citizens of those countries. Of course, we are beginning to see the resumption of normal life, including reopening of schools and other social and economic activities. But this does not mean we should be complacent. It is therefore necessary for all of us as stakeholders to ensure that we remain focused and continue to coordinate our efforts till, as I say, all the countries are Ebola-free. Equally important is the need to start focusing on the recovery efforts of the Ebola-affected countries. There is work that has been done by UNHCR with the countries concerned, and other development partners have also done work on the socio-economic impact of Ebola. And there is a call that we will place before you and before the summit for the write-off of the debts of the three countries. The objectives of our working session today is therefore twofold. One, to assess together the current state of affairs and our continued efforts to maintain focus until all three countries are Ebola-free. The second one is to start the discussion on how can we support the three countries in their post-Ebola recovery efforts. And I will not say any more. I wish you fruitful deliberations, and I hope that this will be an interactive session to really just find solutions and not to make speeches. So with those few words, I welcome. Oh, my sister from ECOWAS, from Guinea, I see you there. And Mano River Basin, yes. So you are all welcome. I see Madame Valerie has just walked in, and the Foreign Minister of Liberia. So I think we're all here, and we should go on with our program. And our program is simple. The next on the agenda is my brother giving us the state of affairs from the UN perspective. But being an African, he'll cover everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I will apologize because I have a statement, in fact, but I will try to capture some of the elements in order to help in our discussion. So, Your Excellency, Dr. Nkosa Zana Dlamini Zuma, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Excellencies, Ministers, and representatives of the affected countries, Excellency Carlos Lopez, Executive Secretary of the Economic African Commission, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to provide you with a briefing on the progress in the global Ebola response and the activities of UNMIR since I assumed the function of Special Representative less than 3 weeks ago. At the onset of the epidemic, Ebola was described as a crisis going beyond health with grave humanitarian, economic, and social consequences that could spread far beyond the affected countries. Leaders agreed that there was much to be done to ensure that people had the health services, food, water, sanitation, and supplies that are urgently needed. Delay would mean an exponential increase in cost and suffering. At the time, credible projection foresaw up to 10,000 cases per week by December. Last September, the UN Secretary General created the United Nations Mission for Ebola Emergency Response, UNMIR, to support the effort of multiple partners that were becoming involved. At this time, the focus of responders was to enable people with Ebola to receive prompt and effective treatment, to ensure that those who died had safe and dignified burials, and to engage all communities fully in the response. Early in October, the number of cases had exceeded 7,000. The damage to societies and economies was multiplying, and the stigmatization of people from the region was on the increase. Poor people, especially artisan and small farmers, were the hardest hit. The momentum for the global response led to the increased personal equipment and supplies being deployed to the region. The African Union responded massively to the call and showed its leadership by offering to mobilize 1,000 health workers from around the continent to support national government, both with the response and with the effort to reestablish health services. The private sector, especially in Africa, provided multiple contributions from earth-moving equipment to social mobilization. But the highest credit on this response has to be given to the head of state of the affected country, their government, their civil societies, and their communities in the affected countries. They merit all our respect and admiration. Since its creation, UNMIR has worked to ensure that all these efforts are coherent and effective and support one government-led operational framework. UNMIR supports the government in their role as crisis manager, identifying gaps in the response and redirecting the effort of UN system agencies as required. Thanks to the global response, the terrifying scenario did not materialize, and the devastating spread of the disease has slowed, the epidemic has turned, and we are now beginning to see an overall decline in the number of new cases. However, the situation is still perilous. There is still Ebola in more than 25 of the 66 district counties and prefectures in the region. When people have Ebola, it can still take them more than 5 days to be admitted for treatment. And more than half of those newly infected have not been identified as contact of people known to have the disease. This is a perilous situation and could easily result in flare-ups. Too many communities are reticent about being involved in the response. They are frightened about the disease and do not trust the responders. Stopping this outbreak, therefore, still requires significant additional efforts. The philosophy that will guide my mandate as UN MER head and moving forward is defined by what I described as the 3 Cs. Countries, recognizing that national governments are in the lead, and UN MER and external partners are here to be an enabler for their effort. Second C is about communities, understanding that the work at the level of communities to change behaviors and own the response is what will ultimately turn the tide. The third C is about coordination, that better coordination among all actors is essential, and UN MER has a key role to play in filling gaps through enhanced coordination at regional, national, and local levels, as well as across borders. In addition, there are key cross-cutting components of the Ebola response that are crucial for the success of the 3 C strategies. Firstly, there is a need to develop a cross-border strategy and policies. The fight against Ebola has to be transnational in light of high migration patterns between the affected countries. Second, both response and recovery effort need to be integrated. The current crisis can be turned into an opportunity, the opportunity to create a strengthened and more resilient health system in Africa. In closing, Excellency, Madam Chairperson, I would like to share my personal account of my recent visit to Sierra Leone and the emotion and pride I felt as an African. I would like to acknowledge the amazing work of Dr. John Sentamu and his team. I recently visited an African Union-operated Ebola treatment center in Bombali district, Sierra Leone. I met and was touched by an incredible team of doctors and nurses from all over the African continent, led by Dr. John. I was pleased to learn that there were only 3 patients at the center at the time of my visit, including an 8-year-old girl. She arrived to the center in a very critical state and was in much healthier state when we saw her. It is also important to note that the center has achieved incredible survival rates. Since its opening, it has recorded a survival rate of approximately 66%, attesting to the courageous effort of the dedication of the African Union team. The response effort shows that Africa has valuable assets that it can apply to support responses to outbreaks. Ebola treatment unit run by African have demonstrated excellent cure rate. African epidemiologists and anthropologists are at the center of getting to zero. African physicians and nurses are helping to restart health services. Dr. John and his team are currently assessing how to strengthen the health services in the neighboring towns and villages. I would like to highlight the personal leadership and engagement of Your Excellency, Dr. Nkosa Zana Dlamini Zuma, Chairperson of the African Union, in deploying a strong team of nurses and doctors to support the response. The contribution of this team, as evidenced in Sierra Leone, has been invaluable. I really thank the African Union and African in general for their substantive contribution to the response. I also reiterate my personal commitment to strengthen UN MER's engagement with our regional and sub-regional institutions such as African Union, ECOWAS, the Mano River Union, for the fight against Ebola to be sustained. I believe that African leadership and ownership in the response is essential. I ask you all to maintain support until the task is completed. Let us minimize the time needed to end the outbreak and the suffering that it causes. Let us revive the fabric of the society, and let us learn and apply lessons so it does not happen again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both for giving us what needs to be done and also giving us your personal account on your recent visit. Commissioner, can we have order, please? Commissioner, do you want to say a few words before I call upon my brother out there to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson, representatives of UN agencies, partners and stakeholders, members of the diplomatic corps, and all colleagues here present. I will say a few words, and I'm glad my job has been made much easier by the head of UNMER. But what I intend to do is to try to get you currently in touch with what the ASOA team is doing. I'm actually going to try to get you interested in the work of ASOA. You will all realize that the strategic objectives of ASOA mission were to backstop all the efforts mounted by the national Ebola committees of the affected countries, and at the same time to enhance the capacity of existing national and international response mechanisms, to complement the efforts of ongoing humanitarian assistance and support coordination efforts in order to maximize efficiency in the responses, to advocate for support for public awareness and preventive measures across Africa and especially in the affected countries, contribute to strengthening the health systems, and currently developing a post-Ebola recovery support plan. We currently have 151 medical personnel in Guinea, 348 personnel in Sierra Leone, and 339 in Liberia, which makes a total of 835 personnel on the ground. Regarding the progress of this mission, the ASOA teams are deployed on the ground by the government Ebola incident management committees, and they support the following 6 pillars of the response as adopted by the countries: case management, surveillance and contact tracing, social mobilization, psychosocial care, communication and information, and logistics management. Well, let me try to take you a little bit into what's happening on the ground at the moment. Regarding case management, surveillance, and contact tracing in Guinea, the ASOA team has helped to follow up to 97% of all contacts. In Sierra Leone, at the ETU in Mabente, a record of 6 cases in 2 weeks were registered. In Liberia, areas like Lofa has registered 0 cases for 42 days at some point, and most areas are slowing down to overall infection rates of about 10 to 15 persons per month. This has been achieved thanks to the strong field team deployed under ASOA. ASOA has been given the task to roll out the public health services in treating non-Ebola cases in the 3 most affected countries in Guinea. ASOA raised up the AU flag for the first time at the team site in the presence of the Minister of Health and the Cuban ambassador and the Cuban team at that point. ASOA also supports the border Ebola treatment and surveillance operations. You realize that there was a concern by the 3 leaders that they had to secure the borders. And in that respect, there are 60 epidemiologists, 60 medical doctors, and 60 nurses that are positioned in various parts of the 3 borders. ASOA volunteers are now able to efficiently handle contagious disease treatment centers without foreign supervisors. This is evidenced by the fact that ASOA is managing 5 ETUs in Monrovia, that's in Liberia, Bombali and Kwenadugu in Sierra Leone, Freetown, and then Koya in Guinea, together with the Cuban doctors. AU ASOA has been allocated a total of 17 hospitals to support in the transition from Ebola virus disease to public health services and restoration support. Another very important engagement of the ASOA team is training and sensitization of health workers in public health facilities to improve on their ability to detect Ebola virus disease cases by increasing their suspicion index on EVD and infection prevention control to reduce in-facility transmission. ASOA also has successfully trained internally 11 trainer of trainers for epidemiology and clinical teams, and are currently helping to train all other foreign medical teams in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. Regarding building capacity of the hosting districts in EVD outbreak, investigation and response, as well as outbreak in general in Monrovia, ASOA is providing health facilities in Redemption Hospital, JDJ Hospital, and the John F. Kennedy Hospital. Now, on strengthening of Ebola virus disease community surveillance system in these areas, which include case investigation and contact listing, contact tracing, and data management improvement to guide on response on operationalization. In Liberia, 400 local contact tracers have been trained by ASOA. Now, the team is also deeply involved in the social mobilization and psychosocial support to enable communities in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea to easily identify and refer suspected Ebola cases to public health facilities. The social mobilization, communication, and psychosocial support team have completed at Grand Cape Mount District Community Training Assessment in joint collaboration with the Liberia Ministry of Health and Ministry of Social Affairs. ASEWA Grand Cape Mount District Ebola Task Force and Liberia Women Association for the Ebola campaign are enhancing the community engagements and participation in taking the Ebola response to 0 levels. There are a few challenges, however. High resistance within some volatile communities, as was stated by the head of UNMIA, who are still in high self-denial levels on Ebola, and threats on health workers has slowed down the overall health workers' responses in the remote areas. There is need for behavior change and communication strategies. Communication and networking is still a challenge, but efforts are underway to deploy secure communication systems, such as VHF and HF satellite phones, to link the responders. Poor road surfaces, road conditions, lack of clean water, and food for health workers has caused some ASEWA staff to fall sick in the remote areas of between 400 up to 1,000 kilometers away. The team has agreed with UNMIA to provide helicopters for quick evacuation under the circumstances. There is also the issue of no fuel stations in some of the areas. Those, they need to carry money to buy fuel on the way, buy tin or canned foods, tents, and mosquito repellents, among other things, for our team to survive. ASEWA incurred some expenses on the renovation and equipment needed to the public health facilities given to them. In other words, apart from just the Ebola concern, they are also helping to backstop the health services in the areas where they are operating. Accommodation of ASEWA personnel still remains a key problem, and we're still trying to look for ways and means to combat that. But in spite of all these challenges, the ASEWA team on the ground is still in high spirits and strongly backed by a dedication and commitment of the ASEWA task force at the base under the overall suspicion of the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Her Excellency Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. We're suggesting some way forward here, a mechanism to train, retain, mobilize, and deploy on timely basis health workers as and when the need arises. This is for the future. We don't need another outbreak to start supplicating and foraging for funds. Ebola has taught us that financial unpreparedness is equal to condemning the innocent and the poor to death. Stepping up engagements with the private sector at all levels, the chairperson of the African Union has paved the way towards these efforts with a high-level roundtable with the private sector and the SMS campaign. These engagements should include means of funding clinical trials for vaccines and drugs, and any other means of support that the private sector has competence in. Finally, a mechanism for effective coordination is not only necessary, but it is one of the key means of tackling such outbreaks. One of the demerits of the initial response efforts by stakeholders was the lack of coordination by several actors on the ground. And this is a priority for all stakeholders that must be looked at from now on. I am also pleased to note that there has been a call for an international conference on Ebola. This could be an opportunity to discuss some of these issues together with any other ideas for a post-Ebola review. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I acknowledge, I think I'd acknowledge my sister there, Sarah Kapa, and now the foreign minister from Liberia, I think I did acknowledge. Now I see our brother from Sierra Leone has arrived. Before I call upon you to tell us what's going on from your perspective, I also just want to acknowledge all the partners that we have worked with that have supported us all. Some of them I see they are here, and also those that have been on the ground, especially putting infrastructure, which has enabled ASEWA to have a place to treat and to work. And also acknowledge our member states who are sending health workers to these places. to Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. So now let me give our brothers a chance to say something. I'll just start with Liberia.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and I bring you greetings from Her Excellency Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who for upwards of 7 months now has not left the country because she's personally leading our fight against Ebola from the front lines. And at this crucial stage where we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, she had to remain. But I will also bring greetings from the Liberian people and appreciation from the Liberian people to all our international partners, to you, Madam Chairperson, to the UN Secretary General, and all of you here. Many of you have paid solidarity visits to us during the thick of the crisis, took personal risks, and the fact that this meeting is practically oversubscribed tells us the interest and the empathy that many of you in the international community have demonstrated and are continuing to demonstrate. At the level of the AU, we are very appreciative for a COR mission. Firstly, the speed, the efficiency with which you organize it and deploy it, and that the volunteers from across Africa who are in our countries, we are very appreciative to the African private sector. We also want to thank the Secretary General for UNMIR and all the other initiatives. The head of UNMIR gave a little snapshot of the situation, so I wouldn't want to delve into that. But at least we are at a point where we say that in Liberian parlance, where in August or September, where Ebola was running after us, today we can say we are running after Ebola. Madam Chair, this success, or progress rather, we attribute firstly to strong leadership from our head of state, secondly to the resilience and cooperation of the Liberian people, but thirdly to solid partnership from many of you members of the international community. We are not out of the woods yet because the Ebola crisis practically became a Mano River crisis. So we in Liberia continue to say that until our brothers from Sierra Leone and Guinea can make significant progress, we cannot consider ourselves out of the woods. And we support the regional initiatives that have been put together for the end of the crisis and for the recovery efforts. Going forward, we are putting together our own economic recovery plan, but we note with enormous appreciation the initiative led by many of you partners and the Secretary General that feeded to us a multi-agency assessment team that is working with us in order to ensure that the plan is robust and it's realistic. We also want to give special commendation to the UN ECA for the document on the socio-economic impact of Ebola, and we associate ourselves with the call that has been generated for debt cancellation for the Ebola-affected countries, especially that it will give us some fiscal space to deal with the teething challenges that are emanating from the crisis. So again, we just want to say thanks to all of you. If I start to list, I would leave someone out, but Liberia and Liberians appreciate you, and this crisis has shown that we have friends indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother, and my other brother. Are you ready? Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. We believe that any case of Ebola today in Sierra Leone will emanate not from the general society, but emanating from those who are under quarantine or those who are under special holding centers. And that is very helpful because you are containing the potential spread of the disease. Now, let me also join him in expressing our sincere appreciation to everybody, every institution that has partnered with us in this fight. Ebola has taught us a very good lesson. And I do hope in going forward, all of us will rally around, we'll develop our synergies to ensure that we learn good lessons as well as bad lessons from the rapid response mechanisms that we have had in trying to pursue Ebola. In the first instance, we now believe that our public health sector's infrastructure requires significant public expenditure. Those days, it's not that we did not want to spend on it, but simply because, particularly the three countries, unfortunately again, more so Liberia and Sierra Leone, are post-conflict countries. So we also had serious, compelling post-conflict agenda items like reintegration, disarmament, remobilization, trying to do like economic recovery, trying to rebuild our social systems. And of course, we did not have all the resources. That's why we had to prioritize. But then when Ebola came, we forgot about all of that. Now we're putting a lot of emphasis. But it's telling us that going forward, we need to spend more money on the public healthcare infrastructure. And we cannot do it alone. That's why meetings like this, we must appreciate the efforts of the AU and all our institutions for rallying around international support. It all began at the United Nations. Some of us were there. Or before that, even the US-Africa Summit. I could remember when President Obama mentioned it, trying to bring an international response. And today, we are very happy. Together with our national effort, we begin to see light in the tunnel, and therefore must appeal to everybody who is seated around here to understand that Ebola has a mysterious way of reimagining. I don't want you to reimagine. And the way we do it is to build our public health response system, emergency systems, early warning systems, and that's why I find that the Ebola response architecture going forward is appropriate for any other virus. Surveillance, social mobilization, contact tracing, making sure that you have good early warning systems. And I think we can replicate this in all of this going forward. But of course, as the chairperson said, this requires resources. And we at the moment, we don't have the resources. So I just want to appeal that we support these efforts. Even in addressing the socio-economic impact, we just don't know how much it will cost us. We know in output terms, we have lost a significant, in percentage points time, a significant amount of output, more than 5 percentage points. And that's very difficult to recover. It requires tremendous resources. As we pursue Ebola, we also must look at development in infrastructure, agriculture and food security, all other aspects or threats of development. So I want to thank you very much for the opportunity and to promise that I will convey this goodwill meeting to my president as well as to the government and people of Sierra Leone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mon frère, Kenny.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais tout d'abord vous remercier de votre initiative d'organiser cette réunion pour faire le point sur les progrès réalisés dans la lutte contre Ebola, mais aussi et surtout pour jeter les bases du relèvement socio-économique des pays affectés. Je voudrais profiter de cette occasion pour remercier l'Union africaine pour les initiatives, et les Nations Unies à travers UNMIR, les partenaires régionaux, sous-régionaux, bilatéraux et multilatéraux, pour tous les efforts qu'ils continuent à déployer pour nous aider dans ces moments très difficiles. Madame la Présidente, pour ne pas prendre trop de temps, je voudrais m'appesantir sur 2 points. Le premier, c'est appuyer les déclarations qui viennent d'être faites, et selon lesquelles nous avons enregistré des progrès considérables dans la lutte contre Ebola. Les dernières statistiques sont encourageantes. Toutefois, il serait prématuré de baisser la garde. Et même si la flambée a baissé, les risques restent toujours qu'il y ait une prolifération. Le deuxième point que je voulais faire, c'est que nos pays sortent d'une période de transition démocratique. Et ce n'est pas pour rien que les trois pays, la Sierra Leone, le Libéria et la Guinée, sont tous les trois pays, tous membres, sont inscrits à l'agenda de la Commission de la consolidation de la paix, ce qui prouve à suffisance les difficultés auxquelles ces pays sont encore confrontés. Et nous avions commencé en Guinée à renouer progressivement avec la croissance avant Ebola, mais tous ces progrès sont mis à rude épreuve par le lot de conséquences négatives de l'épidémie. Les nombreux projets créateurs d'emplois et de richesses dans le pays sont presque tous abandonnés ou suspendus. Je voudrais conclure, Madame, pour dire que ma délégation a toujours insisté sur le besoin d'avoir une étude unique et suivie d'un plan unique et qui servira de base pour une conférence spéciale pour les pays touchés par Ebola. Et c'est pourquoi ici j'aimerais bien remercier déjà le PNUD ainsi que les partenaires, la Banque mondiale, l'Union européenne, la Banque africaine de développement, qui contribuent déjà à l'élaboration du rapport sur l'évaluation des besoins de relèvement suite à Ebola. Et pour conclure, je dirais que dans ce plan, l'allègement de la dette est un aspect très important pour nos pays parce que nos pays ont été confrontés par Ebola et nous avons assisté à la baisse des recettes et à l'augmentation des dépenses imprévues de le budget. Donc, Madame la Présidente, ma délégation sollicite donc l'appui de l'Union africaine et de l'ONU afin qu'elle fasse le plaidoyer en faveur de nos pays pour un allègement de la dette. Je vous remercie.